Alright, so as discussed in our previous video, we are going to be talking about the release pipeline in this video. So I'm going to go to the release tab of our Azure DevOps service, and here we are going to be creating a new pipeline. So as I said before, while you create a new pipeline, the window or the UI is going to look something like this. As you can see, there is something called as artifacts, and there are different stages available. So basically you can keep on creating different stages within this particular pipeline. The pipeline can have stages like development stage or pre-prod stage or production stage, or even something like an alpha stage, beta stage. You can keep on creating multiple stages, and each stage can represent a particular deployment of your application being happening in different development group. So you can see that it's really cool to see that you can keep on doing many different kinds of steps over here. And you can see within this particular pipeline, you can also have a template to be selected based on how your application is going to be look like. So for instance, your application is being developed by Python. You can use this particular deploy a Python app to Azure App Service and Azure database for MySQL. So you can do that, and you can deploy the Node.js app, or you can deploy to a Kubernetes cluster, and you can also deploy in a Azure Service Fabric Compose deployment or Azure Virtual Machine scale set of deployments and stuff. So you can keep on doing many different things based on how you're going to choose. So basically I'm going to choose the empty job right now because I know what I'm going to be doing. So I'm just going to be leaving this guy as it is. And for the stage, this one, I'm just going to name this as deploy app for now. As we saw in the slide, and I'm gonna assume myself as the owner here, and I'm just gonna close this guy, and I will quickly show you how the window or the UI is gonna look like. So you can see that you can also create another job, something like this, or you can also create a dependency job based on that. For instance, you can either go and add a job like this or here, which I am probably not going to be doing as of now. Or you can also add a new stage, something like this. So basically this is going to be a deploy app, or this is going to be exactly the deploy app, but just that you're going to be deploying that in a different environment. For instance, you're going to do that in the pre-prod environment. So you can do that as well, something like this. Oops, I'm just going to do an empty job, and I'm going to call this as pre-prod. I'm going to close this. So you can see that this deploy job is going to deploy in my local machine, and this pre-prod is going to be deploying the pre-prod environment, something like that. So you can keep on doing many different things from here based on the pipeline that how you're going to be designing. And then if you see this particular stage, once I click this, you can see that I have this particular option of stage name and the stage owner. But also you can see there are some options like the after release or manually release. So if you select this after release, then it's going to be once the deployment is being done, it is going to automatically deploy things for me, the trigger, or if not, you're going to trigger that in the manual format. So I guess the preference choice for anybody is going to be the after release, which is going to be the automatic trigger, but the manual trigger is only used if you're going to have a control or the deployment of your application. And then you can also do a schedule here, pretty much like how we did for the build. And then you can do a pull request to deployment, and you can do a pre-deployment approval. So you can get the approval from the set of users that you want to do with. And then you can also get the deployment, and you can deployment, and you can see there is a deployment queue settings where you're going to run this in parallel for a specific thread or something like that. Again, we have not talked about parallel yet. That's why this doesn't make any sense here. So this is about the settings, and you can see all these stuffs comes in here for this particular stage. Coming back to the artifacts, you can see, as I said before, the artifact can come from your build, or it can come from the Azure repos, or it can come from GitHub, or it can even come from an TFVC. So it can be of different source types, or it can be from the Jenkins, Docker Hub, or the Azure artifacts, something like that. So you can have any number of artifacts. And again, if you go on a search in some marketplace, you can also find some more plugin to have this third-party integration. So as that said, I'm going to choose the build for the existing code that I have already executed. So why not, I'm going to choose this particular ASP.NET Core app, which is this one, which is going to be very, very easy and straightforward. and I'm going to do a source alias of drop. So I guess I gave the drop as the name there, so I'm just going to choose that over here. And then I'm going to do a deploy app. So again, for the deployment app, you can see there are like jobs, 1 job and 0 task. So if I select this job, you can see you have a different window this time, completely different compared to before. So this particular job or the task actually has a deployment process, which says the deployment name, and there is an agent job in it. And again, the agent is going to be the agent that we are using all these days, which is nothing but the Udemy pool. We can use that, or you can also add if you want, and I'm just going to leave this guy as it is. And for the artifacts, you can see what is there in the drop folder basically. So you can see that I already have the EA demo app.zip, and I also have the UI test, which is the one responsible for running my Selenium test. So I already have all of them in here, which is awesome. But how are we going to deploy this application basically? I need to deploy this guy somewhere within my machine. So in order to do that, I need to add some task to the agent job. So once I click this plus button, you can see that I now get an all new UI, which is responsible for me to add a task. And once again, you can see there are different kinds of tasks available, like utilities, build, test, package, deploy. And within this, I'm going to search for something called as the web app deploy. So you can see that I don't really get a web app deploy straightforward, because you can see everything is coming from the Azure App Service Deploy or Azure web app and Azure web app for the container, which is not something which I'm looking for. So you cannot get that straightforward. The reason is because Microsoft now doesn't really support or maybe entertain people to go with the deployment of the IaaS application in IaaS. As you can see here, it's kind of deprecated. So the cheat here is if you go to the pipeline and within this particular deploy apps, I'm just going to delete this for now. And now if I try to create a new stage here, you can see there is something called as IaaS website and SQL database deployment. So this is kind of cheat. You can use this particular template, and you can see, I don't know why you cannot see that particular task there, but you can still see this particular option of working with the IaaS website and SQL Server database deployment. So I'm just going to choose that, and maybe I'm going to name the exact same thing, which is nothing but the deploy app, and I'm going to close this guy. And if you go to the 2 jobs here, you can see that I now get the IaaS web app deployment, which is going to be the one which I'm looking for. And I also get the IaaS web app manage and deploy. So both of them are there. Our application doesn't really have a SQL server in place. So I'm probably going to remove this particular deployment group itself. And you get a different kind of stuffs this time. Instead of the agent, now I actually have what is called as a deploy app, which is the stage name for deploying my application. And you can now see that I'm also getting something called as IaaS deployment. And now comes what is called as this deployment groups. So you can see that once I click this, I get a shared group, as I shown you in the previous section while talking about the build pipelines. I showed you there is something called as deployment groups, which also has a shared pipeline. Once I click this, you can see that it actually has a different machine of mine, which has the agent running, which is the release agent running, and it's currently in offline stage right now, which is something because my machine is turned off. But you can create a shared pipeline to do jobs for you, deploying the applications for you in the application. So you can use the particular deployment groups if you want, which I'm not going to be using for now. I'm just going to be creating a new deployment group in our next video, but this is something is required. And then you're going to use all those different details to be filled in to work with your app deployment. So in our next video, we'll see how to work with the deployment group, or maybe understand what is deployment group before starting to work with this particular task.